Ah, he said the thing. Scene 3. Let's melt snow and rebuild New York City. Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game. Unless we start off the game, and now we're in the middle of, I'm assuming this is supposed to be Central Park, but frozen. And if I'm recalling correctly, this is an NES exclusive level, and let me tell you, on a guy whose editing software is very dark in color scheme, having this white staring at me was hurting my eyes while I was editing this. Despite being an ice level, the snow doesn't have any ice physics to itself, but it does have random plows that go by that you can jump over, thankfully. Generally speaking, whenever the game tries to have an entity like that come across the screen, it's on the lower half, so if you stick high, you should be good, but that's not always going to be true. And now we have missile-firing snowmen, because of course. A few hits reveal they're just these weird bouncing spring enemies. You want to be careful of their missiles, though, because they do track onto you, and they have pretty good homing, all things considered. So you want to take them out quickly just so you can avoid them more quickly. And the little piles of snow on the screen, they are hazards. If I recall correctly, they're pit traps, so if you step on them, you fall in. The same can't be said for the enemy stepping on them, because of course, but hey. We also get some exclusive, kind of lighter blue foot soldiers here. And they just throw snowballs, and that's about it to them. As you've probably seen so far, the little jump slash is the most effective way to take on normal enemies, just because it has some good range and it takes an enemy out in one hit normally. Although it only really takes out foot soldiers in one hit, most other enemies can take a bit more punishment, like the snowmen will take like 2 or 3 of those, and some others will take a bit more. You can't destroy any of those weird things that go across the screen, though. Also, I really love the music here. I think this was a game that the soundtrack was the same melody on the arcade version, but they just had to, you know, change it for the NES's sound chip. And I really should see if I could track down, like, an arcade emulator that'll work for me, because I haven't done much with MAME stuff on my end. Just to see if I can hear the soundtrack, because, like, I've heard the TMNT4 arcade soundtrack, partially because there's a game store that's relatively close to where I live that has a TMNT4 arcade machine. And I got through a good bit of the game on one trip there. Generally speaking, like I mentioned in the last part, the little jump slash and the jump kick are going to be most of what you need to take out enemies in the game. But you also want to be careful because you also have weird hazards like this. Ice rocks raining from the sky. Okay. I want to say a couple of them try to home in on your location from when they fall, but you just want to generally be very careful about moving forward because they move with they fall down really quickly. Kind of like Mega Man in Gutsman stage. You fall like a bag of rocks. Means like it's a giant ice rock, Kyle. With that, though, we're at the boss for the stage. This is Tora, I believe. And he does not have a projectile attack like Bebop and Rocksteady do. So we actually have to, we can be a bit more reckless as to where we are in placement. Jump kick is still going to be our best strategy, though, especially if we're getting around him. He has the usual counter attack where he tries to slap you silly. But his main form attack is, I believe, a form of the shoulder tackle and throwing ice balls at you. And he'll run to either extreme of the screen whenever he wants to do that. So if you see him running over there, just get ready to dodge. The weird floating, rotating ball does not have any attacks, though, so you don't need to worry too much about that. It is a bit silly to me that almost every single boss in the game can be taken up pretty easily with this jump kick strategy, though. I mean, it makes some amount of sense because the enemies don't exactly have many aerial attacks. I think Rocksteady and the boss's stage scene 6 are probably the only ones off the top of my head that have... Well, no, same with the boss's scene 5, now I think about it. I think it was scene 5, at least. Have outright counters to aerial attacks. I think later bosses do get a bit faster when it comes to their little counter slap, though, so you want to... my best advice when it comes to jumping, spamming the jump kick The farther you get in the game, be a bit faster on the jump back up. Like, try and hold the button even before you even hit the ground. And now we're in a parking garage, because of course. But we do get a nice little added gimmick here. We have traffic cones. Whenever you see items like this in a stage, you can attack them, and they'll fly off in the direction you attack them. They'll generally only go left or right, though. There's no upwards attacks or anything. And I want to say they kill anything they touch, so you got an extra little weapon there when it comes to bigger crowd moments. We also have barrels that if you hit, start to smoke, and eventually explode. However, the problem with each of these little extra attack options is that while they are helpful, yeah, they're very limited in their range in terms of the size of the hitbox. Like, the signs here and the traffic cones will only go straight forward, and they have a very straight hitbox. Anything that's even, I think, a pixel below them, they won't hit. While the exploding barrels, they just have a small hitbox in general. They don't have like a shockwave effect that makes the splash damage bigger. It's just where the explosion is, from my knowledge. You do want to be careful of one hazard, though, in this stage. Since we're in a parking garage, you might think you're all safe. There's not going to be any cars driving along, but that's not entirely true, as we'll see in a moment. A problem I guess I have with the first half of the game, though, barring the ice stage, is that they don't really do much in terms of enemy variety. They introduce more variations of Foot Clan members, yeah, but they all fight essentially the same way. The Boomerang one's probably the only one that's notably different because it's a mostly projectile attack-based one. It helps that they all have the same amount of HP, so they go down just as quickly, too. Again, that's something that the later games, particularly TMNT 4, really fixed. As did Hyperstone Heist. Hyperstone Heist is also good. Not as good as TMNT 4, because I think some of the weird some of the weird stuff that Hyperstone Heist did was also, well, okay. Yeah, that's the hazard I was talking about earlier. A couple of cars in the background will drive forward, and usually some foot soldiers will spawn out from where it was. That only happens, I think, twice in the stage, but it's pretty sudden. No hint it's going to happen until it's already happened. Now, it makes me wonder if that's one of the things that in the arcade version they had a bit more of an animation for, so you had more time to dodge. One thing that the jump slash is also very good for, beyond its pure strength, is that it has the widest range out of any of your attacks, because you can hit some enemies above and below you with it, too. Ooh, I wasn't ready for that, but I still got out of the way in time. Good lord. Gun enemies are also a bit annoying just because they can pull out their shots pretty quickly, but at the same time, they tend to slap you with their gun more than shoot you with it when you're at close range, so for being all close range turtles with no projectile attacks, it's not that big of a worry. Yeah, another thing that makes the explosive barrel pretty useless is that due to its size, if you want to get enemies into it, you probably have to be close to it yourself, so you're probably going to get hit by it. Again, though, I'm not entirely certain if it's like that in the arcade version, because I'm not sure exactly how much of this game's shortcomings are due to it being the NES version of an arcade game. Probably some, don't get me wrong, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was also just some faults on the game itself. And now we have purple foot soldiers that start to shoot shurikens. They're very inconsistent with their occupation. But we're already at the boss for the stage. Flyform Baxter Stockman, who is potentially the hardest to hit boss in the game. He's always airborne like standard Baxter Stockman was last part. But he spams his projectiles so much more often, the fact he actually has projectiles too, that you're likely going to get knocked out of the sky whenever you try to attack him. It's really hard to hit this guy without getting hit yourself. He also has an attack where he tries to hit you with what looks to be a mop, I think. And when he's like that, you can do a jump slash to hit him, but he's, just due to the way that the altitude stuff works, and as well as the layering, it's kind of hard to do that as well. In the first half of the game, Stockman's probably the hardest boss. Not the hardest boss in the game, period, just the hardest in the first half. Definitely the most annoying when it comes to projectile spam, though. The projectiles, home in on you, sort of. He aims them at wherever you were when he fires them, but if you just keep that in mind, you can just move out of the way in short sequence. Aerial bosses like this are always some of the most annoying fights in beat-em-ups, though. Like, I'm thinking of that one fight, I forget the guy's name, I think it was just Jet in Streets of Rage 2. He was annoying. Stockman was annoying in the first stage of TMNT 4, but not because he was hard, just because he was a lot faster to make up for him not being in the air as much. And at the same time, though, he also just had more combat options in the sequels too, so I guess that also made it a bit better. Because a notable absence from a beat-em-up is that this game doesn't have a throw. And that's not like there weren't NES games that didn't have throws, because Double Dragon 2 at the least, and same with 3, did have throw attacks. I forget if Double Dragon 1 did. I forget if Crocodile Dundee did as well. At least I think it was a Crocodile Dundee game. Was it? I forget the name of it, honestly. We had it. No, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a movie tie-in. But that's the end of Baxter Stockman. And hey, we rescued April finally. Scene 4. Let's get to that secret factory. Did someone say road stage? An admitted visual issue I have with this game, even though I didn't like how piercing the white was a couple stages ago, is that most of the color palettes for the stages are just gray. A lot of gray. And while it makes sense on the NES to do that because of the limited color palettes and you want to make the characters stand out from the backgrounds, it does get a bit visually boring after a bit. They try to vary it up with what the environments themselves are, but it's pretty bland looking at times. And now we got purple foot soldiers who are spear users. You're very varied, and you know what? I appreciate that about you. However, at the same time, the spears are probably their most annoying incarnation, because they can throw the spears without much of a warning, and since they're very big hitboxes, it's hard to dodge them when you're trying to fight them. But they also just have a lot of range period trying to attack with them because, you know, it's a spear. I feel like that's probably an issue more so with the game requiring you to be so close to hit enemies, because every turtle has the exact same range for some reason. But, And hey, Roadkill Rodneys are back. Gotta say though, I love the song. Though it sounds like something I would have heard in Darkwing Duck, which is a bit weird. Ah! Admittedly, for as few, like, unique damage animation as the game has when it comes to getting hit by certain attacks, like getting zapped there is, when they show up, they do have a good bit of character for what they are. In fact, I will say, the game overall, like, in terms of sprite quality, the game looks really good for NES standards. Sprite animation's another thing, but it's a beat 'em up. What are you expecting? Completely fluid sprites on the NES? Really? That's a Super Nintendo thing. And Neo Geo thing. I think the Neo Geo had a good bit of beat 'em ups, at least. I might be thinking of a different console. This stage, though, is interesting for one thing we'll be seeing in a few moments. I'll go over that when the time comes, in that it has another NES exclusive section. The road itself isn't what it is, though. I also think in the arcade version, there was a boss swap, and I think, I forget if it was this stage or the previous one, but instead of fighting Fly Baxter Stockman, you fought Bebop and Rocksteady together. And I could see why they probably changed that for the NES version, because that would be hard. And hey, now the dark purple pink foot soldiers have missiles. You want to be careful with this, though. If you attack one of them while they're holding a missile, they'll drop the missile immediately and you'll get hit by it. So you want to wait until they throw the missile at you before you attempt to attack them. Generally, that just requires staying still for a second and then dodging out of the way when they start their throwing animation, though, so not much to worry about. We also get blue foot soldiers on motorcycles who leave the screen and are never seen again. In a way, it's kind of like certain versions, I forget the name of the exact enemies, but from Batman Returns SNES, the clowns on motorcycles, the one that had skull heads, some of them just left the screen and never came back. Others didn't. Depended on the stage you were in. Admittedly, beat-em-ups are probably one of the hardest games for me to talk about in my normal style, just because unless there's like a unique stage gimmick, it's the exact same stuff all over the place. That's why when it comes to beat-em-ups, I generally, keyword generally, try to do them, if they're like this, with someone or live commentary, just because I can talk more about what's going on in the moment, what comes to mind, and if there's another person with me like Scott, I have more potential conversation topics, obviously. Games like Batman Returns are probably some of the few exceptions because there's a lot of unique stuff per level. Now, what is unique about this stage is that it doesn't have a standard boss fight. You know what? It may have been this stage where you fought Bebop and Rocksteady together now that I think about it. Because there's no boss to this section. You just gotta fight a lot of foot soldiers. They do throw the tires like they did the manhole covers, but they're a lot easier to dodge because, well, they're predictable. And that's the end of this part of the scene. And now for the NES exclusive section. Rocket Skateboarding. It's sort of like, I forget the name, the year and day, but it's like that stage where you fought Krang in Turtles in Time. Or like, it's like that would be. And it does have a unique enemy to it, these helicopters that are very weak to getting jump kicks. They have two attacks. Either they'll shoot a machine gun down forward, which if you try to attack them from the front, you'll probably get hit by. And if you're behind them, they like to drop a barrage of missiles. However, you can just stun lock them with a jump kick to death. They have a bit more HP than most other enemies in the game do, but as you can see, not much to fear from them. And now we just got some standard foot soldier rushes, really. You know, this is cool and all, but I feel like they could have done a bit more with this specific gimmick. Like, maybe a bit of a road hazard rush in a way, sort of like Sewer Surfing would in Turtles in Time 4, or TMNT 4 Turtles in Time. Like with, I guess, traffic cones and Jersey barriers blocking the way and you have to dodge out of the way. I guess what I'm trying to say is this could have been an easier version of Turbo Tunnel from Battletoads. But instead they just decided to make it a different looking version of what we've been doing the entire game with a unique enemy type. And admittedly some pretty funky music. It's overall probably the shortest section of the stage too, of the game too, because there's no boss here again, and you fight very few enemies. Overall though, if you jump kick a lot, you're probably gonna win. Which, big surprise in a game like this. And we're done. And then the turtles died. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 3 we'll be heading into Scene 5. See you guys then.